Now, in the early days, which I find quite fascinating, because here we are, we've got 100 years, 110 years now, or 117 years of flying, and that's it. And they had to build aircraft, powered aircraft, that were extremely light because they didn't have much for a motor. So they used wood, they used cloth. They would build a frame, and the frame consists of the ribs going this way, and the ribs' job is to give our wing its shape, just like our ribs give us our shape. We also have spars that run from wingtip to wingtip usually, and we normally have one towards the front, one towards the end. Now, those frames are all fastened together, glued, screwed, nailed, and make a nice solid frame, but quite light. We then take cloth and we drape the cloth over and we pull it tight. And then they proceeded to literally sew the fabric to the rib underneath. So with a long needle, it would go through the fabric here, out over the rib, back up through here, pulling it tight and tying a knot. And then they move on to the next stitch, and the next stitch, and the next stitch, and so on. And then on to the next rib, next rib. When they get that done, they take a second piece of cloth about this wide, and they glue it over top of that stitching area. Does two things. We get a bit of protection for the stitching, but more importantly, makes it more streamlined, creates less drag. And now we've got our airplane, our aircraft covered with cloth. Now, still won't fly because normally cloth does not allow the air. It allows the air to pass through it. If I went out with my shirt on and the wind's blowing, I can feel that air hitting me. We can't have the air going into the wing. We have to have the air flowing around the wing. So they have to seal it up. And they used a material they refer to as dope. And it was a kind of like a varnish type material that they would paint it, let it dry, and put another coat on, or however many they needed. And when it dried, it did two things. It sealed up the cloth so air couldn't pass through. The material also shrank, so it made it nice and tight, and it became almost a drum. So now our aircraft will fly. But if you take cloth, leave it outside for a period of time, our cloth starts to deteriorate. Sun's rays hit it. It fades. The fabric starts breaking down, and our cloth starts weakening, and eventually we have to replace it. Now, it's expensive. It is time-consuming job, so we don't want to replace it any more than we have to. So they paint it silver, and the idea is reflects the sun's rays rather than absorbing the rays. So they're trying to protect the cloth as much as possible. When they get that done, it'll fly. But people like to have different color airplanes. So you can paint it any color you want. But remember, every time you put a layer of paint on your airplane, it makes your airplane heavier. It will carry the weight of the paint less than it would before. And that's how they built airplanes. And that worked really well with the early slow aircraft. But as aircraft got bigger, roughly approaching World War II, they had to go to a different material. And they moved into aluminum. Today, we use a lot of aluminum, very little cloth, but they also got carbon fiber. They've got fiberglass. They've got Kevlar, and all these fancy materials that they can use for different parts of the airplane to keep it very light and yet extremely strong. And that's kind of the evolution of the aircraft.